Hey, what is going on, everyone? So, Once Human is dropping their 1.6.1 update later today, and they released their patch notes earlier today. So, we're going to go ahead and go through all of it, all the goodies. There's some really cool stuff in this one. So, sit back, relax, and here we go. So, first off, they just made a note right here for the PC players that they've actually optimized the PC client's disk usage. So, this full update is approximately 73 gigs, but the game will actually end up taking about 18 to 20 gigabytes less space when while delivering improved performance, which is really awesome. So I know games these days tend to keep filling up space on our hard drive, so it's good to see that they're optimizing that right there. Then after maintenance, they're also going to be giving everyone a small kind of gift here of a furniture formula for the pipe wall lamp, 1500 Starcrom, 200 Mitsuko's marks, and 100 colorful badges. And this server maintenance is going to start on May 21st, which is today at 4 p.m. Pacific time, 7 p.m. Eastern, and it will last about 2 hours. So chances are, if you're watching this right when I post it, that the maintenance is happening right now. And this update will bring the new visional wheel called Starfall Inversion, an exclusive event called Starfall Collection, plus the early access launch of the new PvP spin-off mode called Once Human RaidZone, and the early access new scenario for PVE called Endless Dream. They're also including various balance adjustments, optimizations, and bug fixes, as they normally do. So first off here, we have the new visional wheel, which is Starfall Inversion. This is expected to last until late September, and the affected scenarios here are essentially every scenario other than the novice ones, so Manibus, Evolution's Call, Prison First Clash, and the Way of Winter. And here's an image that they've teased here for this new visional wheel. It actually looks pretty cool. You'll notice throughout these patch notes that anti-gravity is kind of a theme here, which I actually think is a pretty cool concept. So the way this will work is that every day in-game time, 9 a.m. to 9 p.m., it will generate an inverted star that will generate gravitational tides. So the difference here between this and Lunar Oracle is Lunar Oracle was basically overnight, and this seems to be actually happening kind of during the day into the nighttime a bit. And then during this time, players will enter a unique low gravity state known as stellar levity, allowing for higher jumps, extended airtime, immunity to fall damage, and significantly increased load capacity. You'll also be able to explore and find Star Advent loot crates and unstable aggregates to acquire rare gravity crystals, which I believe is a new currency they've added to the game. So yet again, we do have another currency. And then you'll also be able to use a melee attack in midair to quickly dash in your aim direction. And then there's also a plunge attack that is available in all visional wheel scenarios. They're also adding a new armor set called Gravity Tide, which you can obtain from the unstable aggregates. One piece of this will increase your jump height, 2 pieces will increase your magazine capacity, 3 pieces will take reduced damage from deviants while airborne and gain a damage boost after midair movement, and then 4 pieces, the full set basically will give you even larger damage boost after midair movement. They've also added the Downstar mod suffix, so a new mod suffix that is obtainable from the unstable aggregates I mentioned earlier, and you can equip this to gain stat bonuses when attacking enemies below you. They've also added the Gravity Neutralizer and Gravity Tuner survival items, plus new item formulas and food recipes. And if you're curious of what the Gravity Neutralizer is, this is from another article. The Gravity Neutralizer is a mysterious device, the product of Rosetta Research or Mayfly Grit. It can be toggled on or off at will, and if enabled during a Starfall inversion, it lets you hold jump to hover in place or automatically hover while using ADS or OTS. And then the Gravity Tuner is, it says zero gravity can be inconvenient. The Gravity Tuner temporarily nullifies the anti-gravity effects of a Starfall inversion. Use it again to disable its tuning effect. Couldn't really say that right there. And the Gravity Tuner is fully reusable, which is really cool. They're also adding the anti-gravity foundation component here, allowing players to build floating structures. So you can actually legitimately build floating bases without using an exploit, and they give you a little teaser of that right here. And we have a little bit more details on that right here, where it says this is a special floating foundation that can support other structures. It can be built in your territory or other buildable areas, allowing you to bring your dream floating city to life. Note that the gravity crystals are not refunded when demolishing anti-gravity foundations. So these gravity crystals I mentioned earlier that are kind of a new currency, it seems like, or new ingredient basically for recipes, it looks like you'll be using it for the anti-gravity foundations. Also, it says anti-gravity foundations are similar to ceilings and compatible with all ceiling wallpaper cosmetics, which is pretty interesting. Also, while the gravitational tides are active during the Starfall Inversion, vehicles gain increased jump height, extended airtime, and do not lose durability from high altitude falls, which is pretty cool. And then the Star Advent loot crates I mentioned earlier, you can open those to get a chance to obtain 4 types of gravity warped animals and their skins, and 6 types of gravity warped deviations. So these are the variations on animals and deviations. So these aren't new deviations, but they're just new types of these deviations. Also, if you are currently on a visional wheel scenario that has the Lunar Oracle, you actually will just get the new Starfall Inversion visional wheel. So it says after this update, servers with the visional wheel tag will automatically change to Starfall Inversion. So you won't actually have to move to a new server to get this new visional wheel. Also, all Lunar Oracle phenomena will stop completely, and special items such as the Lunar Whispers will no longer drop, and obviously they'll expire in your inventory anyway. Also, in this other article here, they mention more about the Starfall Collection event. So you'll be able to collect gravity crystals to unlock wonderful rewards, including new weapon skins, charms, avatars, collection items, and more. There is a weekly cap on the gravity crystals that you can get that count towards your event progress. After reaching this cap, event progress will be limited. And then during the event, gravity crystals can also be used to redeem items and rewards from past Visional Wheel seasons, but redemption limits apply. Now let's talk about some more exciting stuff here. We have early access into Once Human RaidZone, as well as early access into the Endless Dream PVE scenario. So first up here is probably the one I'm most excited about with this update, is the new Endless Dream PVE scenario that's entering early access. Now, here are some of the gameplay features. We will have full map access. All existing regions are accessible in Phase 1. Explore Nowcott in its entirety from the southern Broken Delta to Ember Strand in the north, right from the get-go. Now, I know in the past, during some dev streams and also other things that have been mentioned in the Discord, it's been a little bit back and forth whether we were actually going to have full map access specifically for this scenario. They confirmed it, and then they retracted that, then they confirmed it again, and then retracted it again. So it looks like if these are the official patch notes, we actually will have full map access, but we'll just have to see when this comes out if that is actually the case. Now, in the Endless Dream scenario, you will also have something called Dream Zones. Now, it says layers of nested dream zones encroach upon the wilderness, each featuring unique environmental traits and combat effects. As you venture deeper into the nightmares, their effects stack and multiply. So your mission is to essentially purify these dream zones that will help reshape the environment and its rules. Also, construction is possible inside these dream zones even without a territory terminal, so you can essentially free build in these zones, allowing you to unleash your creativity and overcome the nightmare by any means possible. So this is pretty cool. I like this idea a lot, being able to build wherever you are. I'm just hoping it isn't too taxing on the servers. As we saw sometimes with the Prime Wars, there were some issues in Manibus with the way the Prime Wars were being affected performance-wise, so I'm just hoping we don't run into those issues here with these dream zones. They also mentioned that dream zones and deviants will evolve as the scenario progresses. As metahumans eliminate eternal dreamers, they will reduce the durations of phases 1 to 5, intensifying the scenario's pace and difficulty. So your collective efforts to purge the eternal dreamers will also decide the world's fate. So it sounds like as your server defeats these eternal dreamers, the server will just get harder and phases will happen a lot quicker, which is pretty interesting. Curious to know what the phase breakdown is going to be in this scenario to see if the phases really do make a big difference. I feel like sometimes in some of the other scenarios, they don't really make that big of a difference, especially if you've played them over and over again. But curious to see kind of how this works. I imagine people are going to probably be flying through these Eternal Dreamers if I know how people play Once Human. So curious to see kind of how this pace and difficulty ends up, how it ends up being. And now talking about Once Human RaidZone, which also we're getting early access to. It provides an unrestricted PvP survival experience in an open world. In the wild, everyone is both hunter and prey. It's the survival of the fittest. So they have mentioned that this is actually not a scenario. Instead, it is basically a separate mode. And a lot of people have been comparing this to Rust. Essentially, it's a once human Rust kind of mode, which is sort of interesting. And they said during testing, though, Once Human RaidZone will be available for sign up from the scenario screen during early access, but a dedicated access point will be added in the future, making it seem like more of a separate mode versus a scenario. And yes, cosmetic assets are shared between Once Human and Once Human RaidZone. They even made a separate Twitter account for RaidZone, so it makes me think that they're almost trying to treat this like Warzone with Call of Duty. But I don't know. I want to know what you guys think in the comments down below. This has been a pretty hot topic in the community lately. Now, in Once Human RaidZone, all characters will start on equal footing with no inherited supplies, blueprints, or mods. Once Human RaidZone also features dedicated equipment and skill trees designed for competitive play. So this is really a different experience than what we've experienced with Once Human before. And it says all weapons and armor must be acquired within the game realm, perfect for players who prefer a pure PvP experience. So it's unclear to me of whether you're actually going to be able to use your existing character in the early access version of RaidZone if all characters will start on equal footing. Not really sure. I haven't been able to really get confirmation on that. But, you know, hopefully you will be able to use your existing characters in RaidZone. And in RaidZone, your territory structures can be destroyed and raided by other rival metahumans and other players, and you remain vulnerable to attacks even when you're offline. So you'll need to fortify your territory with defensive installations and traps to make sure that you're safe at all times. And of course, you want to stockpile your weapons, ammunition, and explosives to raid rival territories, but you obviously need to watch out for ambushes and hidden traps. This is very much like Rust from what I'm reading. What's exciting though is that combat deviations also feature new abilities and mechanics, offering unique tactical advantages that add strategic depth. So I'm curious to see exactly what those new abilities and mechanics are. And then also you have a new deviation companion called Ursula, that will evolve alongside you, her power growing with every realm fragment that you collect. When fully strengthened, she can summon the devastating Manibus, dealing tremendous area damage and opening a massive dimensional hollow. However, wielding the original entity's power will also destabilize the realm and hasten the arrival of the settlement phase. You must choose whether or not to wield this catastrophic power. So essentially, I guess calling in this giant Manibus is actually going to accelerate the phases, if there are phases, in this RaidZone mode, which is pretty interesting. And honestly, what this reminds me of is like Conan Exiles, or Conan Exiles, however you pronounce it. You were able to essentially summon these gods that could like destroy enemy bases and destroy these, there were these huge characters that you could call in. This kind of reminds me of that, but it seems like you need to make a choice of whether you want to call that in and maybe attack a rival base, but risk, I guess, the RaidZone, not scenario, but the mode kind of ending because you're going to go to the settlement phase. I imagine most people are going to want to call in the Manibus just because it looks really cool, but curious to see how people use this. And they actually mention here that even though this is releasing in early access and most early access titles have incomplete content, theirs is nearly final versions that have undergone extensive internal and external testing. So they're just looking for a lot of feedback from players to help fine-tune things. There's also no restrictions in terms of content on these early access servers. Players can experience all the new early access content. They also have a really helpful FAQ down here, so let's go over some of that in case you guys have these questions. Now, they mentioned that all characters in RaidZone will start on equal footing, so let's talk about this. So all gear, items, and deviations must be unlocked or obtained in this mode. Players cannot bring supplies from Eternal Land or the Space-Time Backpack, and weapon blueprints, mods, and accessories from other modes cannot be used. It also says that all gear and abilities in RaidZone are uniquely balanced for PvP, so as such, blueprints, accessories, and most deviations obtained in this mode cannot be transferred out of it. So this truly feels like a standalone mode and not really a scenario. Typically in scenarios, you go in there and you can, take out new deviations you've got and use them in other scenarios. So this is really almost feels like a separate kind of game. Also, friendly fire is only disabled for members of your hive or team. I haven't been able to see how big the hives are in this mode, but just keep that in mind that you can do friendly fire on all other players other than people in your hive or team. And then if a player is defeated, they will drop most of their supplies except common gear. And then even when you're offline, your character will remain within the game world and can still be attacked. So to protect yourself, you must stay inside a fully enclosed building in your territory. So this seems pretty wild to me. I don't know if this is the way it works in Rust, but typically, I think the bases are just left there, but your character can actually leave the server. But in this game, your character will just remain there. So you'll just need to make sure you're in a pretty safe spot in your base, and you just hope not to get raided. And then each player can actually have up to 3 territory terminals, but territory relocation and teleportation will not be available. And then you can also build temporary structures outside of your territory, which will be useful obviously in PvP combat. And then buildings will have full damage reduction daily from midnight to noon server time. And then there will be crates that spawn in the wilderness, and they're open to any player. They're available to the first player who opens them. Basic supply crates will spawn every 15 minutes. Intermediate supply crates spawn every hour, and advanced ones will spawn every 4 hours. Also, they've added abandoned vehicles, trash piles, and loot crates that are also free for all. They've been added to the wilderness so you can loot them as well. And there is nothing PvE related in RaidZone, so there's no monoliths, securement silos, or public crisis events. There's also no vehicle ownership, so any vehicle can be driven by any player, but cannot be summoned, so just watch out for people stealing your vehicles. And then you'll actually be able to find vehicles out in the wilderness that you can repair, so you won't actually have to build a garage for a vehicle. And then as of this update, players will not be able to craft vehicles or customize their appearances, and they plan to add that later in June. Also, supplies and deviations from events and mail cannot be claimed in RaidZone, so you want to make sure you claim them with an alternate character or in Eternal Land. And then some items like Stardust Source cannot be used. You might be able to still acquire these from community events, but they won't serve any function in RaidZone. And then to ensure fair play, the expanded campsite function that you can get if you subscribe to their meta pass will not be available. And then of course, as I mentioned, cosmetic assets are shared between Once Human and RaidZone. And then they have an FAQ here for the scenario endless stream, so let's get into that. So it says, how many types of nightmare tube are there? How do the types interact with each other? I actually don't really know what this is. I don't think they mentioned this earlier in the patch notes. But it says here that nightmare tubes come in 3 grades: light, deep, and Woneric. I don't really know how to say that. I'm probably an idiot. I'm so sorry. But that increases in increasing order of difficulty. And each light nightmare tube has a unique buff that applies to deviants and nightmare kin within it. And this buff also applies to deep and Woneric nightmare tubes within a certain range. Deep nightmare tubes apply nightmare specs such as the lightning strike, explosive, and evernight effects to dream zones within a certain range. And then these Woneric nightmare tubes possess the effects of all light and deep nightmare tubes within a certain range. And it says every nightmare tube applies special effects to deeper dream zones. When a nightmare tube is cleared, these effects will also vanish. Each Woneric and deep nightmare tube shelters a fixed number of deep or light nightmare tubes. These sheltered nightmare tubes cannot be cleared until the protector has been dispelled. Honestly, this is kind of confusing for me. I tried to search for nightmare tubes in the other patch notes and there's no mention of it, so I'm not really sure what these are. If you guys do know what they are, be sure to leave a comment down below. And then it says, how do I clear nightmare tubes? So they seem to be some sort of event, and why should I clear them? So you can interact with a nightmare tube and use Wakeful Sand to begin the challenge. Defeat the nightmare kin within it to clear the dream zone. They're just mentioning things here that I don't think they've really defined, so I'm not really sure what these are. Actually, they just define it right here. Wakeful Sand can be acquired by defeating deviants, gathering materials, or collecting items inside a dream zone. You can also obtain large amounts of Wakeful Sand via the Wakeful Clocks found in various locations. And if you defeat a nightmare kin, you'll get reality fragments that we covered earlier, and you can craft special bullets and tools, or you can trade it with NPCs for important items. And then the scenario's ending in Endless Stream is determined by the number of nightmare tubes players manage to clear. You hold the fate of the world in your hands. And then when you're in a dream zone, you can only survive for 15 minutes before it kills you. So you can't hang out in a dream zone all day. But you can use reality fragments to craft reality resitol, which increases your dream zone survival time. Now, talking about some new items that are coming in this update, they've added the Sanity Corrosion Capsule, which reduces your sanity and can be crafted in any stove. There's also some new limited time Wish Machine prize pools. They've got the Bounce Bear prize pool, which has the Kuma Wink, Hopefully I'm saying that right. And then the Critical Power Surge prize pool, which obviously has the Critical Pulse crossbow. And then the Gravity Dance Pants prize pool, which has Tattoo Pants, Gravity Tied Helmet, Gravity Tied Top, and Gravity Tied Gloves. There's also some new shop arrivals, of course, a new loot crate here. I'm not going to go into all the details about this because I'm just not personally a big fan of these loot crates, but you can get a little glimpse of it right here. They're also introducing dyeable furniture packs, which will be available after the May 21st update. So some items from the Neon Symphony, Afternoon Garden, and Sunny Coast living room furniture packs can now be dyed at the designer's workstation. I actually have a video on how to dye furniture, so if you're curious about that, it is linked down in the description below. And they've also got some future shop arrivals here that will be available from May 29th. So they've got the Ashen Finale theme pack, the Ashen Farewell theme pack, and the Ember Reaver set. And here's a little glimpse at what these look like. They actually look pretty cool. I don't know if I'll be buying them, but they do look pretty cool. And they're also introducing the Age of Innocence weapon skins, so you can get a preview of those right here. Not really my style, but I know there's some people out there that probably would like it. I do like the design of this scope here being essentially an ice cream cone, so that's pretty cool. They've also improved the rules, the clarity for the rules for the Lightforged loot crates, so hopefully they make a little bit more sense now. I don't really buy them, but in case you're out there and you're confused about them, they have apparently improved the clarity for those. They're also going to be buffing Critical Pulse and Hazardous Object. It says that they're going to implement phased adjustments to enhance their strength. And then they're also introducing a new reload efficiency attribute because reload speed is currently capped, which restricts the effectiveness of reload speed. So they're going to add a new attribute, which is cool. They've also added a switch weapons button for melee weapons to the mobile version. They've also, this will be great for Endless Stream to make it easier for players to find locations to build or relocate their new territories in the wilderness. We've added a visibility toggle for buildable areas. So that should be pretty useful. And here's a preview of what this looks like. So I think this is pretty handy because there's definitely been a lot of times where I have tried to place a base somewhere and it tells me I can't. They've also added separate recent tabs for structures, facilities, furniture, print, and Eternal Land in construction mode. So that should be pretty useful. And then components are obviously sorted by frequency of use there. So I think that's a pretty good quality of life update. And they've also added load bearing capacity, which is an indicator of structure support strength. So that's pretty useful as well. Also, harvesters markets are now safe zones where PvP is disabled. They've also made some improvements to the backpack. So the Stellar Planula stack size is now up to 10,000 and Sproutlet stack size is up to 100,000, which is great. Also, journeys, scenario challenges, and commissions are now accessible from the journey interface, which is nice. They're unifying that a bit. And they had a bunch of other kind of bug fixes here. I'll leave these patch notes down in the description down below if you want to go through them yourself. This was a pretty beefy update, and honestly, I was a little surprised that we were going to be getting the Endless Stream scenario in early access this soon, which is pretty exciting because it's supposed to come out in July. But I want to know, what do you guys think about this update? Leave your comments down below. Like I said, it's a pretty beefy one, and I'm really curious. There's some hot topics in here, such as the new RaidZone mode, as well as the new Visional Wheel. I'm curious to know what you guys think about that. And then, of course, the Endless Dream scenario. I'm excited to hop in. I actually hopefully will be streaming it if I can get into the server. I hopefully will be streaming it tomorrow, so be sure to pop into the stream. I'll be live on YouTube, TikTok, and on Twitch. Those links are always down in the description below. But thank you so much for watching. I really do appreciate it. Thanks for hanging out with me during this longer video here as we went through all the patch notes. But yeah, anyway, folks, appreciate it. Take care. Be sure to subscribe for more Once Human content, and I'll catch you later.